Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Samantha Leighanne and I talk about books. Today is wrap-up day, January wrap-up day. The past couple months I've been trying to do like more vlog style wrap-ups, and I did do a couple of those this month, but I didn't do as many as I wanted to. So there's only a couple of clips, and then at the very end, I'll talk about the last couple things that I finished through the month. To break down the month, this month I only read 10 books, which I mean still is not bad, like don't get me wrong. Just, you know, the last couple months the numbers have been insanely high, but I kind of slowed down a little bit this month, which is not a bad thing. I read 8 physical books, no ebooks, and 2 audiobooks, one of which I got from the library. And the star breakdown, I had 1 5-star, 4 4-star, 4 3-star, and 1 2-star. So I am not gonna hold it up anymore, and let's just get to the clips. Hey guys, so it's like halfway through the month and I am just now getting to vlog. Things have been a little crazy as far as my work schedule goes. I've only finished 3 books so far this month, but I'm reading another 3, so I'll probably finish at least 6. So the first book that I finished was Mr. Mercedes. This is the first book in the Bill Hodges trilogy by Mr. King. I had heard good things about this and I was pleasantly surprised. I ended up really enjoying this. I gave it 4 stars. This is kind of a departure from his normal horror. So when we think about it, when we think about like The Shining, Carrie, this is definitely kind of more of a psychological horror. It's more of a crime novel, like mystery type thing. And I thought that it was actually pretty well done. I enjoyed the characters and I enjoyed the storyline. So within the first 65 pages, he made reference to 3 of his other works in this book, and I live for shit like that. So I really loved the psychological aspect. I loved the character of Brady. I thought he was supremely fucked up and it was really well done, and it kind of felt like you were watching an episode of Criminal Minds. I will say that this is not for the faint of heart. My mom, I had gone over to her house for dinner shortly after finishing this, and she was like, yeah, I started Mr. Mercedes, and I was like, no, Mom, no, like you're gonna hate it, like do not. And she was like, yeah, I already stopped, because she didn't get very far before she was like, I cannot. There were moments where the pacing felt like it was a little bit off. I don't know, it just wasn't progressing at the speed that it needed to progress. 4 stars. I ended up really liking this. So the next book that I read was Little Fires Everywhere. This is by Celeste Ng, and I really enjoyed her debut novel, Everything I Never Told You. So I was really excited to read this. Can't remember if I gave it 4 or 5 stars, honestly. I feel like it might have been 5 stars, but it was really good. Brief synopsis, you have 2 different families. One is literally like the picture perfect family of, I believe it takes place in the early 90s. And then you have Mia and Pearl, and they're kind of nomads. They go all over the place, and finally Mia is like, okay, like it's time to settle down for my daughter. And they settle down in the town that the Richardsons, I think that's their name, the Richardsons live in. And so Pearl befriends one of the Richardson children and becomes very much involved in their family. Well, the mother is kind of a terrible human being, and so things happen. But within this book, there is a family who is attempting to adopt a Chinese American baby. And Mia happens to know who the mother is. And so there is this custody battle that ensues, and it is very public, and it gets very heated and very ugly, and you know that is part of what spurs the conflict in this book. But I really enjoyed the writing. I really enjoyed all of the characters. I really liked what this book had to say about family and about it being important where you come from and knowing where you come from. Motherhood in general, which, you know, I'm not a mom, so like I don't understand that aspect of things, but I really loved this book. I read it very quickly, and I was really glad that I picked it up when I did, because I was in the middle of reading another book when I picked this up, because I was hating this other book so much that I had to get kind of like a palate cleanser, and this was like exactly what I needed at the time. But it was really good. Again, I either gave it 4 or 5 stars, I can't remember which, but if you've been putting this off, I would definitely recommend it. So the third book that I'm going to talk about, The Great and Secret Show. This is by Clive Barker. I have read a decent amount of Clive Barker's works, and I have enjoyed pretty much everything that I've read, with the exception of the Scarlet Gospels, but that's a whole other story that I'm not going to talk about today. And then this right here. And it's a pretty big book, as you can see, and you can see that I started off annotating it, and I got about halfway through and I was like, I don't want to annotate this anymore because at this point I'm hate reading it. So plot of this book is extremely hard to explain. I'm just going to read the back blurb. That's what I'm going to do because I cannot articulate the way to explain this book. Wow, that literally told you nothing about the plot of this book. Like nothing. It told you nothing. So another little thing here. There's a blurb in here from Stephen King that says, I think Clive Barker is so good, I am almost literally tongue-tied. You're tongue-tied because it is almost impossible to wrap your head around this concept. Your main character, Jaffe, whatever the fuck his name is, he works in a dead letter office, right? And while he's working in this office and going through correspondence, he comes across these correspondence from these people and realizes it's kind of like this cult. And they are talking about the art. And the art is this really abstract concept that is really hard to explain. So he begins searching for these people so that he can get a better grasp of the art. So in addition to the art, there is this place, this like consciousness called quiddity, okay? You can reach quiddity 3 times during your life. Once, the first night that you sleep outside your mother's womb. Second, the first time that you sleep beside the one that you love for the first time. And third, right before you die. So what ends up happening is the Jaff, he needs to possess, like he needs access to quiddity on a more permanent basis because he's going to use it for evil because his name is the Jaff. Why would he not be evil, right? And so he enlists this person to help him. His name is Fletcher. Fletcher realizes that he's evil and is going to use this thing that they're working on for evil and destroys it, and it starts this war between them, right? I had a lot of problems with this book, but for the most part, it was just because, number one, this concept is so abstract that it's really hard to wrap your head around and to like really understand what's going on. Number two, I did not enjoy the writing. I had a lot of feelings about this book. You can see where I gave up, but like you can see all of the sticky notes that I put in here. So I just want to share with you a couple of the sticky notes. So one just said, what just actually happened? What the actual fuck? That's too inappropriate. So William is disgusting. Also, why is Barker obsessed with sex and describing boobs? I have them. I know what they look like. And this is my favorite. So basically everyone in this book is the worst and Jo, Beth, and Howie are some demented version of Romeo and Juliet. Because in all honesty, that's kind of what it felt like. They're just this weird fucking version of Romeo and Juliet. So in addition to having a really large issue understanding like the concept, I mentioned in a note that Barker seems like he's obsessed with sex. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 tabs, okay? This is just the first half of the book. There are these gratuitous descriptions of sex, which in my opinion, more often than not, did not add anything at all to the story. Not only is it sex, but it's weird sex. Like, I'm not one to talk about your kinks, like what you like is what you like, but it's like, what is this? There is rape in this book. There is blatant sexism. I had a lot of problems with this book, and most of it stemming from like, I did not understand the point of it. I didn't understand what he was trying to do. Like, as you get further into the book and you really start to like somewhat understand the concept, it could have been something that was really good, but it wasn't. The only reason that I didn't give it 1 star is because number one, it's Clive Barker, and number two, at its core, I could see a solid idea, but I don't feel like it was executed properly. Like, I clearly did not understand something about this, or maybe it just wasn't for me. I don't know, but I struggled so hard with this book, like so hard. So this was my first dud of the year. There is a sequel to this and I own it, so I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna hate read it because I want to read all of Clive Barker's works, and I also plan on like reading more reviews and like doing more research and see if maybe I can wrap my head around this a little bit more, because I don't know, man. I struggled with it so much. So that's all I have for this section. I just talked way too long about 3 books. So yeah, that's all I have, and I'll catch you guys in the next section. Hey y'all, so I'm in the middle of filming a couple of different things, so I figured I would go ahead and talk about some of the books that I finished for the month of January. So Finders Keepers, this is book 2 in the Bill Hodges trilogy. In this book, this is a couple of years after the first book takes place, and we have Bill and Holly. They run kind of a detective agency of sorts called Finders Keepers. I will say that this book pretty much doesn't follow anything having to do with Brady Hartsfield, who is the main antagonist for Mr. Mercedes. And honestly, we really don't see Bill, Holly, or Jerome very much in this book at all. We got to about 3/4 of the book and it was setting up the conflict that was going on here. Then all of a sudden the last quarter of the book was very rushed. I did not enjoy this as much as I enjoyed the first book by a long shot. I feel like he already knew what he wanted to do with book 3 at this point, and I feel like he just needed a story thrown in there to give the proper amount of time between the first book and the third. So, I mean, honestly, I feel like he just could have made a duology and it would have been fine. You didn't really need this because this didn't really offer very much character development at all. It was okay, but it definitely wasn't as good as the first book in the series. But just solely based on that, like, you should still read the first book. Next book is this little novella. It is Binti. This is by Nnedi Okorafor. It's only a 90-page novella, but it takes place in space. You have Binti. She is a human who is a master harmonizer, and she is on her way to this university. And apparently she comes from Earth, and people do not leave Earth very often. So first of all, I just really love the cover of this. I think that it's a very beautiful cover, and you learn like the significance of the cover while you're reading the book. But overall, like, I really enjoyed it. It was very fast paced because it was so short. I really love the way that she wove Binti's culture and, you know, space all together. Her culture obviously has African roots, and just the way that she wove everything together, you know, was really good. But I did really enjoy it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. And the last book that I have this time is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. This is number 1 in the Outlander series. Obviously, who hasn't heard of this book? Well, some of you probably haven't, but did this as a buddy read with a bunch of different ladies. Jess and Christina in Game of Tomes, Julie Pages and Pens, Krista Books and Jams, Nicole, who picked this book, and her friend Jinjin. So there were a lot of us reading this book. Jess, Christina, and Julie all DNF'd it, which I totally understand. This was my 3rd reread, and I definitely saw this book in a different way this time around. There's a lot of stuff that Diana Gabaldon did completely wrong. I found the writing to be a little bit more frustrating this time. The point of view that it was written in was a little bit more frustrating, as well as there are definitely parts where everything feels very info dumpy, because it is a historical fiction, so she's just throwing things out there, and you can tell that she's trying to set things up for you, and she's trying to set the setting up, but she could have done it in a better way than she did. The sole redeeming factor of this book is Jamie Fraser. Whenever I went into this book as a reread, I had said, oh, I love Jamie and Claire's relationship, like they are just wonderful together. And then I read the book. There are aspects of their relationship that I still 100% get behind, but there were a lot of other things in here that I just, for whatever reason, my first 2 reads of this, I just did not catch on to. And I think it was because of like when I read it. So while their relationship as a whole wasn't the best thing about it anymore, I still did enjoy Jamie. Like, I will forever love him. So the first couple times that I read this, I ended up rating it 5 stars, and it's not 5 stars anymore. I ended up bringing this down to about a 3.75 because there were just the way that some things were handled in here, I just couldn't really get behind it. And again, the point of view and pacing was off. You would go through these sections where like stuff would happen, and then you would go through these sections where stuff wouldn't. So, and for it being such a big book, like, you have to have something to carry you through. And I understand the purpose of the not actiony parts were to further develop Jamie and Claire, but I don't feel like that there were some of those parts where she really did that. So while I did enjoy it, I didn't enjoy it as much as I did the first time, and I really love the group of ladies that I read this with. I totally understand them DNFing it. If this had been a first read through for me, I may have DNF'd it too. 3 3/4 stars, 4 stars-ish. It's not quite 4 stars, but it's close. So that's all I have for you guys in this section, and I'll see you in the next one. Welcome back. I still have 4 books that I have to talk about. First book that I'm going to talk about is End of Watch by Stephen King, final installment of the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, or Bill Hodges trilogy. I'm not going to put too much of my thoughts into this wrap up because I actually am going to be doing a series spotlight on this series. The series as a whole was a little bit inconsistent, and there were parts of this book that I liked, but there were really parts that I just didn't. Although I will say that when we got to the end and everything wrapped up, I know that sometimes Stephen King can struggle with his endings, and I did feel like the ending of this one was pretty appropriate and it did kind of fit everything overall. I also had some pretty strong feelings about these characters, which I really was not expecting, and I think that there were a few outlying factors that contributed to that, which I will end up discussing in the actual series video that I do. So again, not going to talk too much about it. This wasn't the strongest in the series. My favorite was still definitely the first. And I will say also that this book did have a little bit more of a supernatural element than the previous two books in the series. So we got a little bit more of like the traditional Stephen King in this, which again wasn't a bad thing. Just some of the plot devices that were used, I kind of had a few issues with, though I could see what he was trying to do. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. But the series as a whole was not terrible, and you can see my full thoughts in probably the next week or so in that series spotlight. The next book that I finished up was Home. This is number 2 in the Binti trilogy, I believe it is, and this is by Nnedi Okorafor, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It is very, very short. It is novella, science fiction. I really enjoyed, very much like the first one, the way that the African culture, what I assume is an African culture, is really woven into this whole space setting, and I enjoyed the themes of home and belonging and, you know, just culture and the importance of culture and those types of things. Again, it is a super, super short read, but I had a lot of other things going on, so I ended up like dragging it out way longer than it should have, and I feel like I probably would have benefited just a little bit more if I had read it straight through. If you enjoy science fiction at all, then I would definitely recommend picking this up. The first book was good. This one was also good. I do want to read the third in the trilogy, which I believe just came out, I think last week, I'm pretty sure. And I believe if you don't physically own this, I did get these copies from Book Outlet at a very reduced price, but I'm pretty sure that if you have access to Hoopla, both 1 and 2 are available via audiobook. Just a suggestion there. Next up, we have Magpie Murders. This is by Anthony Horowitz, and I ended up listening to this one on audio. If you like Agatha Christie in any capacity, then I highly recommend you read this book. So pretty much it's a typical whodunit, but it has a little bit of a twist to it. So the story is told in 2 differing storylines. So the first one, you have the editor, but she has been given a manuscript from a very well-known author of her publishing house who also publishes whodunits. So the very first, I would say probably the first half of the book is this actual manuscript. You're hearing this manuscript being narrated. It's very Hercule Poirot in a way, you know, Miss Marple, that kind of thing. So you get to the point where he announces, oh, I know exactly what happened, and then it just cuts off. And you go back to the perspective of the narrator, and she too is like, where are the last couple chapters of this book? I don't understand what's happening. And so the editor ends up finding herself in a real life whodunit because, what do you know, her author person has been found dead, and so now she has charged herself with trying to figure out what happened. So it is very formulaic. There's a lot of like red herrings, but it was really fun. I did end up really enjoying it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and it was really well done, I thought, because, you know, you get to the end and you get to the reveal and everybody had a motive. It was just trying to figure out all the clues to figure out who had actually done it. So again, if you're into mysteries, if you're into whodunits, I would definitely recommend this one. I gave it 4 stars. And the very last book that I finished of the month, and I listened to it on audio, it is The Indifferent Stars Above, and I don't recall the author's name at the moment because for some reason my brain is not working today. But anyway, there's gonna be a graphic on the screen for you for reference. Anyway, this book is about the Donner Party, and if you are unfamiliar with the Donner Party, it was a group of settlers who were going from the east to what was then the Republic of California. This party ended up leaving a little bit later than they should have, and because they left a little bit later, they ended up getting caught in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and bad things happened. It is nonfiction, but it is really well done. The narrator was not my favorite. However, the actual content of the book was very interesting. It was informative while still being entertaining. You got excerpts from diaries from people who were in the actual Donner Party, and the person who wrote the book, actually one of his ancestors was part of the Donner Party, and so he had a little bit more information because of that. But I did find it to be very interesting. It was very descriptive. One of the criticisms that I did have about it, though, is the fact that obviously because they are traveling from the east to the Republic of California, and much of that land at the time was Native American land, there are some scenes in which they describe the interactions with the Native Americans. It's difficult to describe, but I just didn't really like the way that he wrote that. He described some of the battles, and I did not enjoy it very much, that aspect. It was sprinkled throughout the book, so it wasn't this huge part of the book. However, it's just those little bits I was like, I don't know. It's just historically, when you look at what we did to the Native people and the way that that was written, I felt like it was just like, oh, so this is a thing that we did and nobody should feel sorry for it, even though, you know what I mean? You probably don't know what I mean. I know I'm not expressing myself very well right now. Just be aware that that is part of the book. That's why I took off a star, because I just couldn't get down with the way that that was written, but it still ended up being 4 stars. It was very interesting. It was very informative. Wasn't super familiar with that whole incident. You know the basics from what people talk about and its appearance in popular culture and things like that. But overall, I did really enjoy it. So that is all that I have for you guys today. Have you read any of the books that I mentioned today? If you have, comment down below. Let me know what you thought of them. Please keep it spoiler free for the people who have not read them yet. If you would like to discuss spoilers with me, then all of my social media links can be found in the down bar below. If you are new here and you like what you see and you want to see more, make sure you click thumbs up or hit subscribe if you have not already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.